Hey friends out there in YouTube land, today I wanted to share with you just a little bit of information about how the Hamm camera, this beautiful box camera that we're bringing about, actually focuses and does some of the things that it does. I think I want to start off by talking with you about the image circle, and how we figured that out. So if you're ready, let's begin. So we've got a camera and we've got a lens, right? And so that's pretty simple. The lens is in the cartridge. That means that we know the exact distance from the rear element of the lens to this particular plane right here, which would be the focal plane. The inside of the actual camera back, which is a pressure fit snap fitting, has photographer's felt on it, which helps keep the film flat, and you can tension the film on the box using the knob so that you know that your film is nice and flat. We've also radiused the corners and put photographer felt over it, so we've got an actual radius that acts as the ability for the film to turn over without scratching. Very important right there. But how do we know it's going to make an image? And one of the first tests several months ago I was very happy to perform was actually the ground glass test. Now, it may be hard to see. I'm just going to hold it up right here. You can kind of see that there's a lens right there. You know, at least I hope you can. I'm going to move. Maybe you can see a little bit better. When we turn it around, you can also see that there is a lens. You can see that that's in there. And that's important because the lens is actually focusing the light from the opposite side of this. Now, what you're going to see here in just a moment is going to be very dark, and that's okay. It's just the way it is. But I'm trying to illustrate for you a technique used to determine whether or not we had a good focus. And that was to take a piece of ground glass, take the soft side, not the shiny side, and just put it right there. Now, you're probably able to see in the center a circular area that looks like this backwards. You know, you can see some of the stuff on the opposite side. And that's the very first part of the ground glass test to tell you whether or not you've got a good starting point for your image. And as you can see that we do. Some of the things that you're going to notice right now is that it looks very circular and that the image doesn't fall onto either side very well on this 6x9 frame. And that's only because there's quite a bit of light in the room. If I had a coif on or whatnot, you'd see that the image is actually projected against the entire piece. And I've got pictures of that over on my Instagram at the box's back. You can see that. The neat part about that is that we've got an image that's being produced by the lens on what would be the film plane, and we can actually visibly inspect that. And so that was a very early on success that I had, which was really great. But the question is, how do you focus this camera? And I'm going to go ahead and put this together so that you can see we've got the cartridge, which slides into the actual box frame right there, and also adds structural support elements. Put it in the right way. The cartridge slides right in nice and easily, even though it doesn't look like it for right now. I got two of these things in there. Yeah. What's going on here? There we go. Had to align it right. The cartridge slides in right here, and then we've got two knobs. These are your winding keys. Now, these are pressure fit fittings, which actually go straight through the buffeted spot in between that allow no light to penetrate. That keeps the film separated from the actual camera obscura, the area that we take the picture with, as well as the roll film is also separated from any light just by the way that these two pieces fit together. So nice buffeting going on in there. And then we take the back plate and we put it on, and everything's held together nice. The photographer's felt inside the main body on the inside also acts as a cushion to help your film cartridge slide in and out nicely and keep it in line. So this model right here does not have the window that'll tell you what frame you're on, but it will later. Currently I've been using it without that. It's just an update I need to add into it, and that'll let you know what frame counter you're on. What you do is when you get it in there, you've wound your film and you roll your film this way, and you tension by holding the little piece down, this knob, and not letting it go. When the film's connected, it will roll and spin until you see the other number pop up, and then you can tension your film. You don't want it too tight. You'll feel the proper spot where it tensions and then releases just a little bit. My goodness, I had a frog in my throat. Sorry about that, guys. And then you take your picture using your shutter right there. And as you can see, boom, nice. Very small little shutter. You can hear it. It's really cool. Okay, so here's the question. How do you focus it? That was the question. Well, we use aperture sticks, and currently we're going to have an aperture stick that has aperture ranges on one stick. I'm experimenting for the final production unit to either have one stick which has 3 apertures on it or 2 sticks with 4 apertures on it. I'm really looking at what makes it more convenient for you and I to carry. But right now, I've been testing with this one and another one. What happens is that there's a pressure fitting in here where the aperture slides in, and the main aperture, which most people will use, is either going to be set at f22 or f32, depending on if I use a 2-stick approach or a 1-stick approach. f22 is really great because it gives us the most valuable focusing field as we're just walking around. And let's kind of talk about that. I've got all of my measurements in here written down, and in order to shoot at wider apertures, you've really got to know which aperture is going to be using your near limit and far limit and then hyperfocal distance. And although that sounds really crazy, it's not too tough. At f32, I've got about a 3mm lens opening right there. Our near limit would be 5 feet, our far limit would be 8 feet, and our hyperfocal distance would be anything 10 feet plus. So on a very bright sunny day, we could use f32 with an ISO 100 or 50 speed film. We could also use that 1/200th about of a second shutter speed that's in there, and then everything that you focus on, I mean there's no focus, everything you point your camera at that's basically between 5 feet and infinity will be directly in focus. At f22, we're really near limit of 7 feet, far limit of 15 feet, and our hyperfocal zone comes in at about 14 feet plus. This is very good. When your hyperfocal zone encroaches onto your far limit focus, that means everything from your near limit will basically be in focus all the way out to just a really ungodly distance. Remember, hyperfocal is the focus distance at which everything appears to be in focus. Now that has a lot to do with circles of confusion and all these different things, but for our purposes, it basically allows the camera to have an area where everything will be in focus no matter what. And the wider your aperture, the further away your hyperfocal zone is. So the smaller the aperture, which is the bigger the aperture number, like f22, the closer your hyperfocal distance is to you, which gives you the ability to have a camera like this at a very small aperture that can focus down to 5 feet into infinity. No need for a focusing wheel because you can use the aperture in order to do both jobs. Not only render the light for the image, also render the ability of the image to take a picture in a brighter condition, smaller aperture, but also increase your depth of field so that things are in focus. And that's precisely what we're doing. When we get down to f16, we realize that we're moving into 8 feet for our near limit. We're moving at far limit of about 13 feet, and we're moving over to about 20 feet for our hyperfocal zone. And then it can come on down. When we get into our f8, check out that when we do this, it's actually changing the depth of field that we have between our near and far limit. So when we're at f8, we have a near limit of about 9 feet. We have a far limit of about 11 feet. There's some squishiness in there just because I didn't write down the exacts just for my own personal notes that I'm sharing with you. And then we've got a hyperfocal zone of 41 feet. When we get into our f5.6, we're coming closer to like 9, 10 feet-ish, somewhere 7, 8, 9, 10, where things have the pre-focus in the front. We get into our focus zone, our depth of field, which is pretty big, between that 9 to 11 feet, and then anything about 40 feet on is going to begin to blur everything out really nicely. Now, once again, this requires testing, and that's why I've been photographing with this. So I've been out there with my tape measure. Where is it? Putting things on the ground, measuring so that I can see what my near and far limit is. But that gives us the ability to not require a focusing knob. We don't need a focus wheel because everything that's going to be in the camera will be in focus at a range based on the actual aperture. Now this does get into what's called zone focusing, but the reason it was so popular with a box camera is because it works. This is one of the original inspirations to the box camera that was developed over 100 years ago that makes its way into this box camera. Using the aperture in order to determine the focus is a very, very good way to create a simple machine that consistently works, right? That doesn't have as many moving parts, that can produce a great result, which is really what we're doing here. And we're using the aperture to do that focusing. Now, you might also ask, how do we know exactly what's going to be in our frame? Well, box camera photography has always been just a little bit less because of a focus specific, frame specific thing, because what you see in your viewfinder right here is basically what's going to be in the frame. So when we do begin shipping additional lenses for this or additional cartridges for this, you will have just a little target square on there where the center of the frame will be all the time, which is basically the center of the horizontal and vertical lines right there. So as long as you're putting whatever you want in the center, no matter if we will shoot with a telephoto, a wide angle, or a standard lens cartridge will be able to frame appropriately. Plus, those little frame lines will be pretty nice. We already got that almost square aspect ratio right here, so you will only get about a 90% coverage when you're shooting 6:9, but you'll get 100% coverage when you're shooting 6:6. Really, it's completely up to you. The camera can provide either one of those shooting scenarios for you, even without using a mask. You just wind in the back to whichever number is based on the shooting standard you want to use. A lot of that may sound crazy coming from someone that does not know a lot about photography, but if it was easy enough for your great-great-grandfather to use it, I guarantee you it'll be easy enough for you to use it. Wind till you see the number in the screen that you want, actuate the shutter. Wind till you see the number of the screen that you want, activate the shutter. That's all you have to do. That's it. Wind, activate the shutter. Wind, activate the shutter. And when you're done, you'll feel all the tension gone on the actual winding knob, because you'll have wound everything from the supply to the take-up spool. Now, in this particular instance, I suggest using the bottom reel as the supply, the full, and the top reel as your take-up, mainly because it works best that way for tensioning the film so that it fits nicely. However, you can wind it any way that you would like, but if you switch it the other way, you won't have your numbers line up in the right spot. That just depends on what you're used to. You could always very easily just turn the back film plate upside down, and that would then align the film with the number. So you can use a top or bottom take-up spool however you'd like, or supply spool. Just remember to switch the back plate so that your window to know which frame you're on will be exposed properly, will be shown properly. Guys, I wanted to take this time to share with you how all of this works. I want to tell you one other thing. We've built quite a bit of space in the front of this in order to allow for different lens cartridges. So we've got about 1 inch right here that allows for that. Now, because of that, there's one other benefit that I want to share with you. The front lens the front plate actually acts as a lens hood, because the lens is in the cartridge, which is behind the front plate, which means that we're only going to get the light that we want in here that's actually going to be in here, just like if you were to use a lens hood. If you were to say to me, Rob, will that cause any vignetting? No, and here's why. The length of the lens is actually the center part that we're using when we're focusing on this 95mm length right here. So it's just like if you were to choose to crop to use only the center part of the frame or the center part of the lens rather than the outer part of the lens. And that's why we've used such a large lens design in this particular camera, so that we can have an opening that can facilitate also the use of different lenses in the cartridges at different times. So we've built the lens cartridge opening and the adapter that moves into it in order to be able to facilitate using smaller diameter lenses or larger diameter lenses in the cartridge so that we can change them out. It's a really great, interesting idea, and I hope you like it as much as I do in your new box film photography. Guys, I'm Robert Hamm with Hamm Camera. I want to thank you for watching and remind you I will catch you on the flip side.